I want to thank you so much for joining us to kick off our Uplifting Black Women series in partnership with Goldman Sachs' 1 Million Black Women. I'm excited to be joined by my friend, Simone Sanders, an anchor at MSNBC, who's going to co-moderate this conversation with me, as well as Representatives Shontel Brown and Nikema Williams. We're going to talk about some of the systemic issues facing Black women and the progress that's been made so far, and where we think there can be some more efforts that can and should be done. And afterwards, I'm going to be joined by Melanie Campbell. She's president and CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation for a Fireside Chat. I want to really thank, though, our hosts tonight, HQ DC House. If this is your first time being here, they've been really gracious to open up their doors. It is a co-working space. They have all the different floors here. Encourage you to check it out. If you're looking for a space like that, they've been really wonderful to work with for us on that as well. And as always, you can find Punchbowl News on all social media platforms at Punchbowl News. We encourage you to share this conversation. We want it to be amplified much further than just in this room. And now, I'd like to welcome another friend of mine, Joyce Brayboy, Managing Director at Goldman Sachs, for some brief introductory remarks. Joyce.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to those of you in the room who are here in person. We're so happy to have you. And also welcome to those who are watching via live stream. We know there's so many places you could be, or other places you could be this evening, or other events with so much going on, but we really are so happy that you decided to join us. This is to participate in the first of many conversations that we're going to have focusing on uplifting Black women. I'm Joyce Brayboy, as Anna just said, with Goldman Sachs, and I have the privilege of serving as the co-chair of the 1 Million Black Women Steering Committee. For those of you who are not aware, Goldman Sachs has committed $10 billion to invest in 1 million, to positively impact at least 1 million Black women by the year 2030. That's what the 1 Million Black Women Initiative is. This is the largest commitment ever that really focuses on investing in Black women. Today we're here because we know that the systemic issues facing Black women must be addressed through the collaborative efforts between both public and private sectors. To highlight this further, 1 Million Black Women recently launched a new initiative focused on amplifying the voices of Black women across the country to catalyze federal policy changes that will improve Black women's lives. Our first step was to ground our work in data. We recently released the results of our first national survey, which put fresh numbers to the economic disparities that Black women face. And with the help of the legendary Hall of Famer and the University of South Carolina women's basketball coach, Don Staley, we are sharing our findings and encouraging action. Let's play the video, please.
Success goes beyond the court. 40% of Black women working full-time have a total household income under $50,000. These numbers depict the challenges and the resilience of Black women. Students, heads of households, and those who've reached their well-earned retirement. Bridge the racial wealth gap and uplift Black women. There's still time on the clock.
The video is powerful, even though the statistics are difficult to hear. We are excited, though, to be joined by the driving force behind the ad, the creative director, Mara Chance from Color Creative. Thank you, Mara. And as Coach Staley reminded us, there is still time on the clock, and today we're looking forward to a conversation focused on solutions. Before I hand it over to Anna and Simone, who will formally introduce our special guests, Congresswoman Shontel Brown, Congresswoman Nikema Williams, and Melanie Campbell, I want to introduce Jessica Taylor, the National Director of 1 Million Black Women, and thank her for being here today. Thank you, Jessica, for your leadership. And thank you to our 1 Million Black Women community, including the alumni from our Black in Business program. We have several in the room tonight. The the Black Women Impact Nonprofit Leaders, which is a grants program under the 1 Million Black Women umbrella, and others whom we work closely with. Thank you for joining us and for being such amazing partners. We appreciate you. Anna, turn it back over to you.
Thank you, thank you. Joyce, really appreciate all of those remarks. Now, I'm very excited. Simone Sanders is going to join me on stage, as well as the congresswomen who just got here, which is very exciting, straight off the House floor. If you all want to come up, we have Congresswoman Williams and Chantel Brown. Thank you so much. Hello. All right. Hi, thank you so much for this. Good, how are you? Come sit, please.
Right. Oh, I need these flats. I mean, I had to run here straight from the house.
All right. Well, never a dull moment here in Washington. We're going to kick it off with a couple of News of the Day questions and then really get into the conversation that we're here to talk about. But first, you just got off the House floor, voted with Democrats' help to keep the government funded, but just for a short period of time. How confident are you that Democrats and Republicans can find a pathway forward so that we don't have a government shutdown in January or February? I'll start with you. Yeah.
Hello. Hello. Whoa. Hello, everybody. I am Congresswoman Akima Williams-Yaw, and hot off the presses, typically what we say in our signal groups amongst members is that Punch Bowl and Jake Sherman is the 436th member. So you probably know all of this before we do. But we just voted, y'all, because, and House Democrats have always said that the only path forward is a bipartisan path. And working together, we will always put people over politics. And that's exactly what we did today. We made sure that we stood up for people who are receiving WIC, people who are receiving our veterans who would be shut down and who would not be paid during a government shutdown. Last week, I stood with TSA officers in Atlanta, the world's busiest and most efficient airport. But the TSA officers, they keep us safe every day, and they wouldn't be paid during a shutdown. So we knew we had to find a path forward. And that's exactly what we did under the leadership of Leader Hakeem Jeffries. He keeps us focused and grounded on the people that we serve. So it's not about bailing out Republicans. It's about making sure that when we go home and look people in the eyes that we were sent here to serve, that we can remind them that we're always going to put them above politics. And that's exactly what we did today. And I have no doubt that as we continue to do this work and go through all of the appropriations bills that are still left to deal with, that we will continue to do that because that's what we've always done.
You know, last week, Democrats had some big victories on Election Day. One of those big victories was in your home state of Ohio, Congresswoman. But much is being made about the president's poll numbers. They're not great. My friend Jonathan Martin had a very expansive column the other day with lots of advice from anonymous Democrats to the president and his reelection campaign. I'm wondering, what do you think needs to happen within, the next 6 to 9 months as we barrel towards Election Day 2024?
Again, thank you for having me here. It's such a pleasure and always good to be with you. We are very excited about what happened in Ohio. For those who don't know, we passed a reproductive justice amendment in Ohio, making sure that we protect women's right to make their own healthcare decisions. And we do look at the president's numbers, and there's a saying in politics, there's only 2 ways to run, and that's unopposed or scared. And those numbers are scary, Simone. But what I will say is that polling has never been favorable for Joe Biden, and as our good friend Antoine Seawright likes to say, that when the polls count Joe Biden out, we show them that they don't know how to count. So we will continue to show up and do the work. And what that means is just making sure that we are meeting people where they are, going into the communities, and making sure that they're connecting the dots to the benefits that they are receiving. So, for example, we've got the Veterans PACT Act. I had an opportunity to travel with some folks across the country. And in South Carolina, we met a fine woman who said that her husband's PAC benefits had gone up to 100% from 15 for several years. She was only receiving 15% I said that was not a miraculous act of God. That was the PACT Act that the Congress and the president took into action, making sure people understand the Affordable Connectivity Program that makes internet access affordable to them, virtually free in some cases, is an act of Congress by way of the bipartisan infrastructure law. Making sure that people understand that that $35 cap on diabetes insulin medication is an act of Congress. And so making sure the things that are happening in everybody's lives that are really hitting their bottom line, their pocketbook, kitchen table issues, talking about them in a way that they understand that Democrats have been delivering. And as my sister said, we have been putting people over politics from the beginning, and we will continue to do that. So just meeting people where they are.
All right, I want to shift to the topic of the night, uplifting black women. Let's talk about the racial wealth gap, because that is stark. We saw a lot of numbers here in the intro that Goldman Sachs has put up there in terms of surveying of just how stark it is, particularly the gap between black women and white men, 90%. What role do you think, I'll start with you, Congressman Williams, do you think Congress can and should play when it comes to trying to find ways to close that gap?
So I represent Atlanta, y'all. And for far too long, Atlanta, it's a good thing to represent Atlanta, but it's bad that we continue to be at the top of the list leading the nation in the racial wealth gap. So we've got work to do. I moved to Atlanta after college from Alabama looking for promise and opportunity because it was this place where black people could come and grow and prosper. And then to learn that communities that I serve are leading the nation in income inequality and the racial wealth gap was troubling. But now I'm in Congress and I have an opportunity to do something about it. So this Congress, we recognize that black women hold an outsized proportion of the student debt in this country.
Right.
And we tell young people to go to college, follow the rules, and you can get ahead. And we see what is happening with the student debt in this country, and it's holding us back from closing that racial wealth gap and building generational wealth and buying homes and passing it down from generation to generation. So I've introduced the Clean Slate Act so that people who have gone through a rehabilitation program with their student loans, they have an opportunity to get that cleaned up on their credit report so that it doesn't continue to haunt them after they've gone through rehabilitation and they're paying their student debts again. And that's just one thing. Also, alternative modes of credit to look at when you're buying that first home so that we can look at other things. You're paying your cell phone bill every month, you're paying your rent every month, but those things don't always show up on your credit report. So how do we look at alternative methods of credit reporting so that we can expand who's eligible to buy a home so that we can build that generational wealth and help to close the racial wealth gap? These are policy decisions, and we can do something about it.
Congresswoman Brown, you know, black women, and I know Goldman Sachs has the data, but a number of black women are leaving the workforce and becoming entrepreneurs of their own. They are starting their own companies, their own businesses. And I know you have been very focused on equitable resources for small businesses. You did an event in Cleveland where the SBA Administrator Guzman came. Can you talk to us about your efforts to ensure that the resources coming from the Biden administration via the SBA, which there are many, making sure that those resources are allocated equitably? Well, especially in light of the Supreme Court decision where some people are suggesting that that is not what can happen now.
It is a crazy time to be in politics with the Supreme Court decisions that are being made, but we'll talk about that another time. And a shout out to Joyce Brayboy for all the work you do with Goldman Sachs and the things that you were able to do and bring into our community, into Cleveland, working alongside of our college programs to make sure that women have the opportunities. Those are the key things that we need to continue to do. Administrator Guzman came in. We had a business fair, a small business fair that people could leave with tangible tools that help them start their pathway to entrepreneurship. Because as a former or even a recovering entrepreneur, I know all too well the challenges of having a business and making sure that you're dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And so many times I would go to events where people would leave with just recommendations. Well, we had agencies and other their government affiliation set up so that people could leave that program or that event with their LLC already established. So we wanted to make sure that they had some real tangible results when they left this event, and also access to information, understanding how they could get capital. So those are things that we can do in a tangible way, and those are the things that were critically important to me because, again, I was all too familiar with what would happen when I would attend those programs. So understanding it from a very personal position as legislators empowers us to be able to shape and develop programs and opportunities and events that leave people with real tangible results.
Congressman Williams, I want to follow up on what you're talking about, kind of the home ownership and how important that is. You were recently on a kind of leading a panel at the CBC Legislative Conference around the work that the Urban League of Greater Atlanta is doing. Can you talk about kind of that tangible experience that you've had and what you're trying to kind of affect that change in Atlanta?
So anybody not familiar with the work of the Urban League? Everybody is familiar with the work. Well, we have a very special branch in Atlanta, the Greater Atlanta Urban League, and I was a youth member on the board back in the day when I was younger. And I am fortunate to continue to work with them and uplift the work that they're doing in our communities. And they have this, an entrepreneurship program where they invest in Black businesses, Black and brown businesses in Atlanta. And I was able to grant them with one of my very first community project grants. So you hear a lot about members of Congress having pet projects. My pet projects are the people that I serve. So everybody in my district is important, and we continue to do the work to uplift them. And the Urban League has been doing so much work in the Black community on how do we make sure that businesses have that access to capital. And if you've ever been to Atlanta, if you've ever been to Supreme Fish Delight, Boston Supreme Burger, they have some good catfish, good burgers, like everything, y'all. But this is a family business that Mr. Waleed has continued to grow in the community. And then he's been bringing in, during the pandemic, he had to get really creative as doors were closing, and he and his wife did all of the research. She's a PhD. And so looking at other ways that they could be creative with expanding their business. And the Urban League of Greater Atlanta, they were a recipient of one of their grants so that they can continue to do this work, not just the good food, but also the work. And so they created this program where they were delivering meals to seniors. And that's what they did with their workers who were laid off because people weren't coming in the doors to buy food, but getting creative on continuing to serve the community, but still that entrepreneurship spirit. And how do we fund that? And we can do that through acts of Congress.
How many people in here have a retirement savings plan, either through work or personally? Okay. Well, let me give you some numbers. I know y'all got it through work. Let's just be very clear, okay? If the government don't do one thing, it's going to take care of its members of Congress. Okay? Most of the time.
Okay,
so Goldman Sachs 100 Black women, they did a survey. And the survey found that only 49% of Black women have a retirement savings plan. And that is compared to 62% of U.S. adults overall. And I don't know about y'all, but I want to retire one day. I never knew anybody.
I'm ready to retire now.
Okay, come on now. I want to sit in my chair a little longer, but I'm ready. Call me in about, a couple years. And I had never known personally anyone in my life who had retired until I met my mother-in-law. And she retired from the VA after, 35 years working there. What can the U.S. government do anything? What can Congress do to ensure that more Americans are making a plan for retirement savings and that they have access to that knowledge, that information? And I mean, look, we want to retire someday. People don't want to work until they die.
Well, I'm going to yield to the lady on Financial Services Committee. So.
Come on, financial services.
So it's about these conversations because so many people don't know the numbers, and this is probably contradictory to everything that I always say. I don't represent numbers, I represent real people, but the numbers paint the story, and we need the numbers to arm us with the facts. And so knowing this, that contributes to the racial wealth gap in this country. And especially if you look at what happened during the pandemic, people leaving the workforce for so many other things, there's ways that we can uplift this and address these retirement accounts. Because think about if you leave the workforce as a woman and to take care of a child after childbirth, or for any health related issue, then that is money that even people who have a retirement account at work, you're not paying into it. And when we looked at what happened during the pandemic, more Black women left the workforce. That's less money that is being invested in these retirement accounts so that people can retire someday. I don't want to work until, forever either, Simone. We might get to retire together. We can travel the world.
Yes, we get a summer house.
But it means that we have to address so many other issues that go into this, like the childcare crisis in this country. And so when I introduced a bill, the SEDS Act, and it's a bipartisan piece of legislation that would make sure that economic development districts have to consider childcare when they're thinking about you have to consider transportation, traffic, housing, but childcare is not one of those indicators. But my bill would change that. And that means that more women can stay in the workforce, which means you're putting more into these retirement accounts so that you can retire someday. And you're not looking at these gaps of years where you're not paying into this retirement account.
And I would just add the Equal Rights Act, right? Women getting equal pay for equal work, right, y'all? We're getting paid 67 cents on the dollar, which comes out to about $22,000 a year, which is over a lifetime of work. Almost $1 million, 900,000.
Interest.
And add interest on that, right? And so those are the things that we can do, that we continue to push for every year. But as we continue to change the landscape, because as we often say, to change the laws, we have to change the lawmakers. So as we continue to improve our numbers of representation, we just got another CBC member. Yes, we're 60 deep at CBC now. Thanks to Gabe, Amo. But when we do that, then that's how we also can address that bottom line as it relates to retirement funds too.
I want to add one other stat because I think it's important. From the 1 million Black women survey that they recently did, 71% of Black women still feel like they're living paycheck to paycheck coming out of COVID. The government did a lot of things in the first couple of years of the Biden administration in terms of kind of some of the bigger programs. Congresswoman Brown, maybe I'll start with you. What do you think the role Congress should have? Are there things that can be done to help people feel like they can actually pay their bills?
Well, the news is telling us, and we see in some of our everyday lives, we're going to more shows and vacations and concerts and things like that. So inflation is coming down. But I think the other thing, as it relates to the work that we were able to do in the 117th Congress when Democrats had the majority, we did some really great things that can address some of these problems. The challenge is government tends to work a little bit slow. But when we think about the bipartisan infrastructure law, the number of jobs that it will create, and these are jobs that are good paying union jobs that don't require a 4-year degree. And also the CHIPS and Science Act, in that legislation, as Representative Williams talked about, there is a component where manufacturers have to consider when they receive those funds, making sure that they have child care centers in those manufacturing plants. That was something that we were able to put through to legislation. So we've got the work, we've passed the legislation. So now we're in the education and implementation phase. Now we're connecting with the agencies, the companies, the businesses, to make sure that the things that we were successfully able to do in the 117th that the Republicans continue to try to call back are actually implemented. So while we may not feel it right now, I can say with great confidence that these things are going to make a huge difference in folks' lives. So those are the things that I am very proud of as I came into the 117th Congress, and now comparing the stark contrast of what we're dealing with right now, where we haven't done much of anything to address people's concerns or lowering costs or improving wages. It just has not happened in this Congress, but we have a lot to stand on from the 117th, and we will continue to build on that. We just got to get the majority back in 2024, y'all.
And we will.
Mm-hmm. I guess one follow-up on that then. I do think that while people are going on, I saw a thing on the Today Show today about how the cruise industry is back, honey, and they are just on the cruises, and they had to tell people that you can't bring your gummies on the cruise. Sam Brock did a whole package. So while yes, they're going on cruises, they're going to the movies, they're buying entertainment. Everybody went to go see Beyonce and Taylor Swift. But I also saw a package today that talked about how expensive eggs were for folks at the grocery store, how people are making very just life and death decisions, it feels like, when they get to the checkout counter about what they can put in their cart. What are you all doing in Congress right now, if anything, I mean, given what is happening on the Hill, to ensure that black women can participate in the recovery? Because there are a lot of people across the country that feel like, ugh, it hasn't hit me yet, but I'm still gonna go see Beyonce.
No, and that's real, Simone, because you got to find joy even when we're going through the trials. You got to find the joy. And that's, I mean, if people, regardless of that the unemployment numbers are the lowest that they've been for black people, regardless of the fact that we know that inflation is like, we're not going into a recession and inflation is not rising until you feel it in your wallet, in your pocketbook, then it is a whole nother story. And so people have to feel the results. And as Congresswoman Brown shared, like, it's hard to see, like, it's hard for that to happen fast coming out of policy. And so there's a lot of policies that were passed in the 117th, so much that we have these big omnibus bills that it was hard for us to even explain what was included in this legislation, like the Inflation Reduction Act. And so I would just start telling people, y'all, that's just a fancy way of saying we're lowering costs, putting more money in your pocket, because Inflation Reduction Act doesn't mean anything to people. But if you talk about how we're going to bring down the cost of that monthly power bill and that monthly gas bill through this, then that means something to people, because you see it when that bill comes in every month. The eggs might not be lower. I don't know how to control the chicken industry, but when you look at your heating and cooling bills, then that is going down based on policies that we passed with Democrats in charge in Congress. So we've got more work to do, but we've made tremendous progress.
Working on the farm bill, y'all. Get them eggs prices down.
I want to finish on this question because unfortunately we are out of time for this first panel here, but I'm going to go to both of you here on this one, which is, we've talked a lot about financial stability and how different it's impacting black women. I'd love to hear your kind of thoughts on health, right? That's a whole other piece of this, right? And how health can impact financial stability and what you're hearing either from your constituents, or how you think that can be kind of better lifted up.
So I'll start. In local government, I started as a county council representative, and I'll try to make a long story short, but we did work as it related to infant mortality. In Cleveland specifically, we have first-class hospitals, but third world infant mortality rates, and those things just did not make sense. So what we did is some research, and what we found was it was systemic, structural, and institutional racism that was causing these great disparities. So after the work was done, I was asked in October 2019 to put forth a resolution to declare racism as a public health crisis. Now, this is October 2019. I'm like, okay, y'all, I don't know how I'm gonna do this. But as the Lord would have it, we were hit with the pandemic in 2020. So December 2020, we started seeing the health impact and the disparities on the black community as it related to COVID. We fast forward to May of 2020, the tragic killing of George Floyd. So I was able to introduce that legislation, not just as words on paper, but with some real tangible metrics and measurable goals in there. And healthcare was definitely a part of that, but also transportation, education, housing. There's so many things that goes into the disparities as it relates to health. Many people will tell you, you can just overlay a map as it relates to redlining and then some of the health disparities that you see. So, so this is an issue that I have been working on for a very long time, and it is very personal to me because, again, after seeing so much tragedy in Cleveland, Ohio, with all of the great medical facilities that we have, it is just very frustrating. But the good news is folks like Robin Kelly, who is our chairman of our Healthcare Brain Trust, and Lauren Underwood, who has been working on the Momnibus. I mean, we have put forth legislation that really has really highlighted the disparities and made investments to deal with some of the issues specifically as it relates to infant mortality, because it is so deeply connected to so many of the other issues around structural institutional racism. So.
We'll give you the last word.
I think that was the most surprising part to me, that no matter where Black women are in this country, education-wise or income-wise, we are still leading the pack with maternal mortality stats. Still at the bottom of the list. Like, the rates in Georgia mirror that of third world countries for Black women. And maternal mortality, for those who might not understand, it just means that more Black women die in Georgia within 1 year of childbirth than in third world countries. 1 year, y'all. And the rates just increase. New studies just came out last week. And for the first time in 20 years in this country, the maternal mortality rates have increased. First time in 20 years. And this is something that, again, these are policy decisions. And so I introduced a bipartisan bill, the Tech to Save Moms Act. And this bill would increase access to telemedicine so that more women can get the care and the access that they need. In Georgia, we have 159 counties. Don't ask me why we have so many, but 159 counties. And out of that, half of our counties don't have an OBGYN. Half of the counties.
Stunning.
So imagine trying to get access to the care that you need when there's not even a place for you to go. So the Tech to Save Moms Act would increase that access to telemedicine so that more women can have access to health care and doctors to get you the care that they need. I have an 8-year-old now, and the day that I was set to be discharged from the hospital in Georgia, it's the state law, you only get 2 days. 2 days for a vaginal birth. And so I thought I was going home because it was my birthday. And the nurse came in, she discharged Carter, cut his band off, cut my band off, and then she was like, well, I should check your blood pressure before we let you go home. And immediately she went and got the doctors, called them in, because I was suffering from postpartum preeclampsia. And I could have died had I gone home. But luckily, she checked my blood pressure before wheeling me out in the wheelchair and would not readmit my baby. That's a whole nother story. So, yeah, that was a problem for me. Probably raised my blood pressure even more. But these are challenges because we have to make sure that we are addressing this at every angle. And so just giving access to healthcare is one part of this, but also knowing that even with access, the systemic issues that Black women face in this country, we are still at the bottom of the totem pole. And so I am reminded every day that I'm operating in a system that was not designed by or for people who look like me, but I'm determined to make it work for us, y'all.
All right. I can think of no better way to end the conversation. Thank you both. Thank you, Simone. We really appreciate it. I'll let you walk off this way here. All right. And now we're going to start our fireside chat here. Melanie Campbell, if you will please join me. We're going to have you here. I'm going to go here. You are the president and CEO of the National Coalition of Black Civic Participation, and we're going to have a fireside chat. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
No problem. Thanks for the invitation.
Of course. All right. So first, most people probably do know, but for those who maybe are on the live stream or don't know in person, can you tell us about what the coalition is, your role, and what you're doing there?
Well, first again, thank you all. Thank you to all of my Goldman Sachs sisters here tonight for the invitation. The National Coalition is a 47-year-old civil rights and social justice organization. We've been around since 1976. So we focus on Black civic engagement and voter participation. I also wear a second hat with one paycheck. Y'all hear me say that all the time. I convene the Black Women's Roundtable. And we focus on issues impacting Black women and really focus on Black women's leadership intergenerationally. And so we focus on health and wellness, economic security and prosperity, education, global empowerment, and seeing those as 4 strategic avenues for lifting up Black women because we are in a global economy. We have a Black Youth Vote program focused on young people. I have an institute now, and Goldman Sachs is a partner in that at Clark Atlanta University, which is a social justice institute that we launched last year, or this year, the year's a meshing. We started the process, and we have a fellowship program that's focused on the South, where majority of Black people live. So that's in a nutshell.
All right. A lot of hats, but you have been in the policy arena for a very long time. We just saw 2 kind of stars in the Democratic Party, Black women lawmakers. We've seen the numbers grow. What kind of impact do you think that can have in terms of the policy and some of these systemic issues we're talking about today?
Well, people always talk about Black women. We're the secret sauce when it comes to moving policy, when it comes to our vote. I say it's no longer a secret. Everybody agree with that? It's no longer a secret because we're owning that power and that as Black women, because we are heads of household, we also drive what happens in our communities, quite frankly. And so one of the things that, I know that's not the question, but I'm going to throw this in here. One of the concerns I have right now is there is an attack, right? There's a lot going on when you see some of the quality things that are being targeted to lift up Black women. And so whether that's an attack on affirmative action or it's an attack on, freedom, Fearless Fund. Thank you, sister. Fearless Fund out of Atlanta. So we have to be really, so when it comes to policy and the kinds of things, the great work, which is why I'm glad to be a part of 1 Million Black Women Advisory Council, is that we want to make sure that we hold on to those opportunities. So the secret is out who we are. And so there are people who want to roll that back. So we have to utilize policy to protect those and expand those gains.
We're talking with both Congresswomen about retirement savings, about the economic disadvantage that Black women have. One of the biggest takeaways from the recent Goldman Sachs 1 Million Black Women survey. What do you think? I think we all know what some of the contributing and the systemic factors are, but what can Congress do? What do you think that needs to happen here in Washington to help change that equation?
I'm going to ditto what some of the things that our Congresswomen just said, right? Because one of the reasons Black women have a hard time when it comes financially, there are also other issues like paid family leave, right. The fact that they talked about child care, the cost of child care. Quite frankly, because we are heads of household, a lot of times our paycheck is the family. Anybody can say amen, is your paycheck the family paycheck? Mm-hmm. And if you're an aunt with no kids, you the ATM machine. Anybody? Can I get an amen? So that's a real reality that we also our check doesn't go with it. So there needs to be more policies. Sister Brown, Congresswoman, talked about the equal pay, and so when you look at the fact that 40% of Black women don't make $50,000. How are we making it, right? So that reality. So someone talked about like Black women are increasing in entrepreneurship, but yet we are one woman shops. So we don't have the kind of resources that are needed. So again, 1 million Black women. I'm going to put y'all didn't ask me to do this, but I'm just saying. Entities like the public-private partnerships, I think, is what's needed, especially when we're talking about the 8A program right here in the federal government. Mm-hmm. We have to protect that, right? Because that's a lot of ways of how folks are able to get the capital that they need in order to grow their businesses. That's under attack right now. So we have to really utilize policy. So I'm really glad to see companies like Goldman and others that are really going to get more into some of these things around policy that impact economic security and opportunity. And we have to really get that done in a real way now. And definitely as we go into the election, make that an issue.
I want to talk about 2024, but before I do, we ended the conversation talking about maternal mortality, the health implications, and how that is also really tied into financial stability. How have you seen that play out? And do you think that that's a reality that the people under the dome kind of know and are aware of?
I think people under the dome know. It's whether or not you have enough of them that care, right? And politics is about power, and so being able to figure out how to leverage that power in order to move. Now, I know I'm nonpartisan, but I'm just stating facts. You also have to have the right people in office who believe in that, right? Who believe in that. And so the issues around health care, the Congresswoman Nakima talked about, the reality that is also a part of why the wealth gap is so large, because of the amount of health care debt we may be in, or if you're in a state that doesn't have Medicaid expansion. One of the things that closed the wealth gap during the pandemic, when folks, the Biden-Harris administration was talking about the poverty rate went down, was because the funding went in and people had opportunities to quality health care and other kinds of economic benefits that helped in that. But a lot of that went away. And so you have these new bills, and these big bills that they talked about, and we have to follow the money, right? And make sure that we're paying attention to where that money is going, who's getting that money. One of the things that we are focused on and working is around closing the digital equity gap. And that actually has a major impact on the ability for you to grow your business. The technology impacts all of that. So we have to make sure that we're paying attention to that. Affordable connectivity program, and need to make sure, policy, to make sure that that funding continues is a very much a policy priority that the Black Women's Roundtable is focused on.
All right, I want to end on 2024. 3 issues that Goldman Sachs 1 Million Black Women survey found are on the top of mind for Black women heading into the election: the future of democracy, jobs, and the economy. Talk about the impact that you think Black women could have. 86% said they are planning to vote in that survey in terms of what candidates get selected and what is actually at stake.
Well, first of all, 86% is too low. So we need to figure out what we need to do. Black women have to, in order to really shift, I'm being very nonpartisan, to do what we need to do, sisters and brothers, right? We have to vote 90+%. So 86% concerns me. I also know there are other studies that are showing that a lot of folks, if you talk to them, don't plan the vote. And Black women, we drive the Black vote. We drive that Black vote. The other piece of that is we are the influencers. So we have to find a way to influence our brethren, right? Lift them up, but also influence them to own their power. A lot is at stake. Everything that's there is on there. But the other thing that I know, the studies that we've done, and still one of the main concerns for Black people, Black women, is the impact of racism in this country. And it is on the rise. So as we look at any of these disparities, there is a through line of how racial inequities are impacting that, how rising hate crimes and other kinds of realities that we don't really like to talk about are impacting that. And so I spent 30 days on the road, which is why you may see me leaning, because my back is still worn out for being on the road in Florida for 30 days in the month of October. And we went from small towns to big cities and hearing from our people, and many of those were Black women, and the concerns that they have. Yes, economic security is at the top, but and even talking to a lot of students on HBCU campuses in the state of Florida, you have a lot of state policies that are impacting that. So from a policies perspective, we have to work on the federal, yes, but we also have to get right where it matters in people's local and state elections as well.
All right, Melanie, thank you so much for your time this
Thank
evening.
you.
I appreciate it. A big thank you to both congresswomen and their teams for making this conversation possible, as well as our partnership with 1 Million Black Women. We appreciate those of you who joined us on the live stream, as well as you in person. We have cocktails, we've got food, so hopefully we can do some networking. Again, thanks so much. Have a great night. Take care.